He had buried his brother on a winter morning, so bitter the earth refused to yield, the frozen ground splitting the shovel's edge like brittle bone. The prairie was silent that day, save for the hollow groan of the wind and the muffled curse in his throat. Since then the rancher lived alone, years folded upon years, the empty rooms of his cabin echoing with ghosts that never spoke his name. Solitude became less a choice than a sentence, carved into him with every sunrise he faced alone. The neighbors in town whispered he had turned to stone. Some said he spoke only to his cattle. Others swore he could not bear to look another soul in the eye. He worked the land with a stubborn rhythm, mending fences, burning brush, fixing what time tried to undo. At night he sat before the fire with beans simmering in a dented pan, staring across at the empty chair, as if some unseen figure might return. Loneliness was not a visitor to him, but a companion, constant and unyielding, seated always at his table. But even stone feels the weight of years. His 35th summer left his hands cracked and his shoulders bowed, and though he held himself upright, the silence grew heavier. He carried it as men carry chains, never loosening, never setting them down. The land bore witness. The windmill creaked mournfully with each turn, the dry grass whispered against the fence posts, and the sky poured its vastness over him without mercy. It was in this slow-dying silence that the sisters came. He first saw them at the edge of his property, two figures walking against the dimming light of late afternoon, their steps steady but weary. Dust clung to their skirts, long dresses of deep green and red, and belts cinched their waists where small pouches hung. Their hair carried the desert's wind, tied with feathered bands that caught the sun's last fire. They were not strangers of noise or commotion, but of quiet dignity, each step deliberate, as though they had rehearsed the moment of their arrival. The rancher watched from his porch, uncertain whether to speak or let them pass. Yet they did not pass. They halted at his gate, their gazes meeting his with a calmness that unsettled him more than any storm. The elder of the two, though not by much, lifted her chin. Her voice was low, like water moving over stone. "We seek no harm, only a place to rest our feet if you have the kindness." He said nothing at first. His throat tightened as if unused to speech, and when words came they were rough, a man remembering language. Water's in the well, bread on the table. So they entered, unafraid. Inside the cabin, the sisters sat with a poise that reminded him of church pews, straight-backed, hands folded, eyes absorbing every creak of wood and flicker of flame. They ate slowly, gratefully, speaking little. One traced the pattern of a chair he had carved himself, noting the steady hand that shaped it. The other tilted her head at the sound of the windmill outside, whispering that it sang a lonely tune. That night, silence gathered between the three of them, though it was not the same silence he had known before. This one was expectant, as if waiting for some word to break it open. The fire popped and hissed, sparks flaring into the dark. At last the younger sister spoke, her eyes fixed on the flames. "We have no kin left. The world has taken them, one by one, and left us wandering. We search for a place not only to stay, but to belong." The rancher listened, his face unmoving, though inside a cord pulled taut. He thought of the grave he dug years ago, of the endless silence since. Yet before he could speak, the elder sister turned her gaze toward him. Her words came soft, steady. "We would ask something of you, though it may seem a burden." The firelight caught her eyes, and for a moment he feared what might follow. "We would ask that you take us as your wives, both of us, not one alone, but together." The room seemed to stop breathing. The crackle of flame, the groan of timber, even the restless wind outside, all fell still. His jaw tightened. Years of silence had not prepared him for such a request. He stared into the flames, seeing not fire, but the ache of a life-long denied warmth. The sisters did not press, did not plead. They simply sat, their dignity unbroken, their offer laid bare like truth itself. Finally, his voice came low, as though dragged from the bottom of a well. "I have lived with ghosts for years. I fear to live with love again." The words hung heavy, heavier than the chains of solitude he carried. The sisters lowered their eyes, but did not retreat. Their stillness was not surrender, but a quiet defiance, a choice to remain where he might yet turn them away. Outside, the prairie wind rose in a long mournful cry, carrying their unspoken answer into the endless dark. The boom came not from thunder, nor from rifle, but from words whispered in town, sharp as bullets, cruel as knives. At the saloon, men laughed into their whiskey, voices low, but carrying enough for the rancher to hear. Two women trailing after one lonely fool. Desperate sisters laying claim to a man who could not claim himself. Their laughter spilled through the walls like poison, and the rancher, standing outside with supplies in hand, felt shame burn through him hotter than prairie fire. For years he had been silent, unseen, untouchable. Now the world's eyes were upon him, mocking not only him, but the two who had dared to believe in him. He walked home with shoulders stiff, words curdling inside. The sisters sat waiting by the hearth, their dresses catching the fire's glow, green like the hush of pine forests, red like embers, holding their last breath. They saw the storm in his face before he spoke. His voice was gravel, heavy with what he had heard. They make a game of you, of me. They call me a fool, who lets loneliness drive him to madness. The elder sister lifted her gaze, calm as a still lake. We knew the town would talk. Their tongues wagged for sport, not truth. But he was not soothed. The years of solitude had taught him to guard himself with silence, not with defiance. He feared ridicule more than gunfire, for ridicule reached deeper. He turned from them, staring into the fire as though it might burn away his doubt. The younger sister rose, stepping close enough that her presence pressed against his solitude. We do not ask you to defend us with fists or guns, only with truth. We chose you not out of desperation, but because we see the man you do not let yourself see. Her words struck him harder than any insult. For a moment he felt naked, as though she had reached into his chest and placed her hand upon the hollow there. His voice faltered. I am not the man you think. I am weary, broken, little more than dust carried by the wind. The elder sister stood then, her hand resting upon the back of the empty chair he had stared at night after night. That may be true, but dust can build mountains, and weary men can still be kind. We did not ask for perfection, only for belonging. The room swelled with silence again, but not the silence of loneliness. It was a silence filled with choice, heavy and waiting. He looked from one sister to the other, and found no pleading in their eyes, only steadiness, as though they had already accepted whatever answer he would give. Yet the words of the men in town gnawed at him, rattling chains forged by years of solitude. That night he did not sleep. He walked the fence line beneath the stars, every creak of the boards a reminder of his smallness. By dawn his decision was not yet made, but something had shifted. The weight of shame was no longer heavier than the weight of their faith. At sunset he saddled his horse and rode into town. The saloon doors swung wide, the air thick with smoke and laughter. Men turned, grins sharpening when they saw him. He walked forward, boots striking wood with deliberate thunder, and stood where every eye could see him. His voice came clear, steadier than he had ever known it. These women are not beggars. They are not desperate. They are my family, and I am theirs. Call me fool, if you wish. But know this, I have lived years with ghosts, and I would rather be a fool with love than a wise man with nothing. The laughter died. Chairs scraped back. No man dared answer. The rancher turned and left, the weight on his shoulders suddenly lighter, as if years had fallen away with those words. Outside, the sisters waited. They looked at him not with triumph, but with quiet recognition, as though they had known he would find this courage all along. For the first time in years, a smile broke his face, not wide, but enough to light the hollows time had carved. That night the empty chair at the fire was no longer empty. Yet as the flames burned low and the stars spread wide above the prairie, the rancher felt something stir deeper still, an unease, a question unanswered, as if the past he had buried was not finished with him. The prairie wind moaned through the shutters, carrying with it a promise or perhaps a warning. He glanced at the sisters beside him, their hands resting near his, and wondered what shadows might yet come knocking.